Well, good morning, everybody on Scilly, and particularly at the Scilly Independent. Today, we'd been hoping that we'd stroll out of our holiday let just below the lighthouse on St Agnes, go down to Periglis, then along the west coast beside the campsite, look out to the Western Rocks and the Bishop beyond, then maybe saunter on down to Beedy Pool, pause there for a while, maybe find a bead or two, although doesn't happen very much nowadays. Then hike over Wingletang, up Barnaby Lane, turn right back onto the path and down to the Turk's Head for a pasty and a pint. And I'd have been well prepared. I'd have had my trusty kittle in case the wind came up. I would have had my cagoule just in case it might rain. And I'd have my sunglasses for when the sun came out. As always on Scilly, prepared for every eventuality. But of course we're not. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we, like thousands of others, have been able to travel to Scilly this year. So instead, we're in Ghana, where we've been living for the last 18 months. We're into our 90-somethingth day of self-isolation, but making the best of it. And I know that we are very much some of the lucky ones here. I'm still in paid employment. We live in a small but very nice little house, and we can get pretty much all of the necessities and provisions that we need to survive. So compared to many, we are very, very lucky. In the capital, Accra, in Ghana, where we live, it really is a city of incredible contrasts. On one side, it's a bustling, dynamic, modern city with big office blocks, some very big, expensive houses, some very nice areas. But on the other side, there are the shanty towns, the overcrowded suburbs, lacking sanitary provision, and populated by people who are literally living hand to mouth in incredible poverty. And with the rainy season just about starting here, things are going to get very tough for them. Let me just show you a few photos of what Accra looks like. So as you can see, a city of enormous contrast and massive disparities. At the moment, there are something a little over 4,000 cases of COVID-19 have been detected here in Ghana, resulting in just over 20 deaths, which is always tragic. But in the bigger picture of things, our mortality level is certainly much lower than most at the moment. The worry is, if it does escalate, will the public health sector and the infrastructure of the country be able to cope with it? Nobody, I think, really knows. We just have to hope that it could, if necessary. We did have a fairly strict lockdown for around 3 weeks, but that was lifted a week or so ago. We still have a ban on schools are closed, bans on public meetings. We have to wear a mask if we go out in public. But essentially, people have now gone back to work, and life is carrying on reasonably normally, I would say, which is almost inevitable, that you can't sustain a severe lockdown in a country where so many people do live hand to mouth, are reliant on going to work simply to survive. They're reliant on family and extended family for income. They're sharing facilities and sanitary equipment and things like that. So I think we just have to accept that and see how things go and hope for the best. This year would have been my 50th anniversary of my first visit to Scilly back in 1970. Of course, there have been many changes over those 50 years, although I think less on Scilly than many places. And most of those changes probably for the best. When we first went to St Agnes, there was no mains electricity. It was all done via the generator, and water was quite severely rationed. We had to choose. We got one jug of hot water a day in our bed and breakfast, and we had the choice whether we wanted it in the morning or the evening. So we could wash once in hot water and then once in cold water, and that was it. I have to say here, the water and electricity are pretty regular. We have the odd cut out, but they're rare and they don't last for too long. And the internet, to be fair, is probably as good as anywhere else, as good as anywhere in Europe or the UK. It's very fast and very reliable, so we're very grateful for that. To some extent, we are still effectively hostages. There's a complete international travel ban here, which has just been extended for another month through to almost middle of June. So even if we'd wanted to get out, we really wouldn't be able to. But at the moment, we're happy enough to stay. Having said that, even under normal circumstances, the journey from Accra here to St Agnes is quite a long one. First up, it's a 6-hour overnight and very expensive British Airways flight from Accra to Heathrow. Then a train into Paddington, and then another train down to Exeter. Then the Sky Bus across to St Mary's, and then finally on board the Spirit of St Agnes. But it would have been worth every minute and every penny if we could have made it. In the meantime, though, I've kept myself fairly busy, as well as the day job. I've got myself involved in David Redfield's Renga Poetry Initiative, which has been really interesting. I'm also engaged with the Johnny Mac Jukebox radio show on Islands FM on a Saturday afternoon, which is enormous fun. And I've just completed a kind of ready, steady cook challenge for friends and family, and posting the results of that online. So that's kept me reasonably well amused. It's around 32 degrees here in Accra. Feels more because of the humidity, but it's quite strange to realise that we're only actually about 2 miles from our house to the Atlantic coast. It's the coast which is protected by the Gulf of Guinea, so it's not as rough as the rest of the Atlantic, and I can promise you it's many degrees warmer than it is on Scilly. But at the end of the day, it's still the Atlantic. So in one sense, we're only a boat ride away from you, even if it is a 5,000-mile boat ride. So in the meantime, I'll just have to make do with the local meat pasties, which are nowhere near as good as the ones at the Turk's Head, I can assure you, and no real ale, just the local club beer. But better than nothing. We'll survive. And we're already booked to come back in May 2021. So with a bit of luck, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.